represent one of the most disadvantaged communities in the country. You look at any tick box of things and charts you don't want to be on, my constituency is in it. It overwhelmingly voted Conservative in the last election. You can argue about whether the PM has followed through with a lot of the things he's said, but he's talked about this stuff, Help to Buy schemes, levelling up, creating jobs in those communities.
Yeah, but Ben, that's what I'm saying. That is tinkering around with, like George Osborne did, making loans cheaper and all the rest of it.
Let me come back to it. I think I'm going to agree with you. So the fundamental thing to me here then is the conversation about what government is for. It's incredibly frustrating when people go, the Tory government have done X. A lot of it is external. A lot of it is an economic drift that hasn't been tackled. It needs to be tackled, and it never has been. Which again, you mentioned Kemi. She's the only one in this contest who is saying, well, government is trying to do too much for too many people, and we need to get back to a place where it focuses on the things that really matter and does them well, because it hasn't, and it hasn't for decades. So until you really get to grips with that, it's not going to get fixed. The key thing and the key cost is around the cost of living challenge we've got now, but wages and house prices, right? That's the thing that is a particularly generational problem. And I think what we've probably not got right, it's worth saying first and foremost, a lot of those challenges, pressure on the health service, there are all sorts of extraneous things that affect that, right? We've got more doctors and more nurses, but the pressure is huge and ever growing. So I don't think the Tory government have done some of those things, but we do need to address house prices, and we've not been able to do that effectively. I think partly because we all have very strong views about planning, and whenever it comes into legislation in the House, we all argue and then it gets delayed. That's a cross-party thing. But what we really need to do, I think that's about the balance in the country. I think that's an economic and a geographical balance. So we've got opposite problems in London and the South East, where prices are through the roof. We've got the opposite problem in seats like mine in Mansfield, where there aren't the jobs to sustain housing growth and the infrastructure to sustain housing growth. One is the answer to the other, isn't it? It's rebalancing the country. And I think, to be fair, although these things take a long time, that's what the PM's been talking about. Actually, that's the levelling up agenda to me, creating the jobs, having the skills and the infrastructure in the places that most need it, so that you can move that pressure and rebalance that around the country. That takes a long time, though. But I'm elected as a politician to have a clear set of values and a view. I'm elected, in my view, because of, certainly our system is set up to be elected because of those values and views. And I'm there to represent them. I think you can't possibly keep everybody happy. And part of the problem of recent governments, I think, is if you, and I mean over decades, if you are spending your time trying to respond to media and keep everybody happy and not be in trouble, have negative newspaper headlines, you end up pleasing nobody because you don't stand for anything. And the thing that I want to see going forward is, I always refer to signposts rather than weathervanes, right? I want a clear direction. I want to know what you believe the country to be.
Just like Tony Benn.
Oh, well, some say. You know what? I know what you want the country to be, and you're going to lay out how you're going to get there. I don't want somebody who's going to change their mind every week because the Daily Mirror said something negative. And I think the sooner we get used to that, the problem with it all, of course, we talked about social media earlier on, that amplifies the either end of the conversation. You lose the debate. And I think the Ukraine's a good example, perhaps, of where it's easy to say everybody agrees. There are all sorts of challenges and issues with it. And they're not things, it's not like a media whitewash, not things you're going to see in the media. But if you talk to people on a day-to-day basis, they'll go, well, what about when these home situations are breaking down? Where do people go? What's that mean for the housing waiting list that's already got 3,000 people on it? What's that mean for my school places? So there is another side to that argument, and debate that happens face-to-face. It's not the big story, right? We all agree on the principle, I think, largely. But there's still nuance and debate to be had. And the sooner, I think, we get to a place not to be the Kemi advert again, but that's kind of what she said. And her view on equalities has been...
You're getting the plugs in, aren't you?
Her view on equalities has been, well, the most important thing on these really emotive issues is that we can have a proper conversation, because the reason they're so emotive is because they're really important.